Hello, nursing community. You are listening to the inaugural podcast series entitled Opportunity Avenue for the University of Texas Medical Branch School of Nursing. This is an opportunity, belonging, and enrichment initiative focusing on the voices of the community. This podcast will focus on sensitive topics that are encountered within the nursing profession. Content experts will answer questions that will provide insight and resources to enhance awareness and create a sense of belonging for all.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Opportunity Avenue. I am Dr. Cindy West, and I have today's guest, Brianne and Alex, who are members of Allies in Health at UTMB. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them. Alex, can you tell me a little bit more about yourself, and Brianne, you as well?
Yeah, sure. So hi guys, my name is Alex. I use he, they pronouns. I am currently a second-year medical student. I'm also a MPH student, so I'm kind of around both the School of Medicine and the School of Public and Population Health. I'm one of the officers for Allies in Health, specifically Events and Education Chair. So I'm involved a lot with kind of hosting our events, especially as well as kind of having some educational opportunities for the public to learn as well.
And I'm Brianne. I am also a second-year medical student and also a dual degree Master's in Public Health student. I am also on the e-board for Allies in Health, also on Events and Education, and my pronouns are she, her.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with me. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right on in because I know this particular topic, allyship, is so important, especially in today's society. Could you help define what exactly allyship is and specifically the context of supporting the LGBTQ community?
Absolutely. So I think before we start even talking about allyship, we have to talk about the frames in which allies can come alongside us and function. Because it means something very different to be a good ally in these different spheres. And those spheres, I'm going to define them as like structural, institutional, and then kind of social or interpersonal. And I also think it's important to acknowledge that you can be an ally in one of those dimensions, but not necessarily the other. And it really depends on your strengths and kind of your personality traits. So I would define like the sort of institutional side of allyship as being anything that relates to navigating the system, whether the system is school, society, healthcare, any of those bigger structures, finance even, that have to do with accessing material resources or accessing the aspects of day-to-day life in society. And then there's the interpersonal sphere. The interpersonal sphere is more on the person-to-person level, the individual level. It's, am I taking you home to my parents as a friend, and am I introducing you with the correct pronouns? If we're, out in public and you're getting harassed, will I be a support for you? Those interpersonal dimensions come with very different implications than the structural sphere and vice versa. So to be a good ally in each of those spheres, though, there does have to be, I think, an element of commitment and understanding to the importance of standing up for your queer friends or coworkers, whatever the relationship may be. But navigating those different spheres comes with very different skill sets. So, for example, I mentioned earlier the kind of example of bringing someone like a friend into an atmosphere that may or may not be welcoming to them. Are you ready to be a sort of shield against things like harassment or bigotry? And are you able to hear things that are more subtle forms of bigotry? How well informed are you? That goes a long way in making a strong interpersonal ally. When it comes to a more structural ally, though, there's more of a dimension of helping others navigate the system. So, for example, that's where that's where we really come into like leveraging one's privilege. That's something that kind of comes up in these conversations a lot. What does it mean to have privilege? Usually when we're talking about privilege, we're talking about structures. We're talking about structures of power and who has it and who doesn't. If you're someone with dimensions of privilege, you're capable of leveraging that power that those who are in need of the advocacy don't necessarily have inherently. And that becomes a lot more, it takes on a different dimension when it comes to visible minorities versus invisible minorities, but we can start to unpack those different nuances later. But to be a good structural ally, you have to be well informed about how a structure works, about roadblocks that exist within the structure, whether that's just as an example, a particular administrator who has bigoted attitudes towards certain groups. If you're someone who's part of the more privileged groups in your system, are you able and willing to use your voice, knowing that you may be taken more seriously, perhaps, knowing that you may be better respected in the room? Are you willing to take that and use it to further improve that area for your less privileged colleagues, friends, whoever it may be?
Okay. Wow, that's a powerful example and explanation that you just gave us. Thank you for sharing your perspective. You said a little bit about intersectionality with a lot of the concepts that you just said with allyship. How can allies be more mindful with the intersectionality of the sense of belonging? And how does that intersect within the community that's around, or that revolves around race, gender, identity, and socioeconomic status?
Yeah, so that's like really a really important topic to talk about. So first, kind of just defining what intersectionality is. You know, everyone is different. They have a bunch of different identities and things that they align themselves with. And that unique mixture of your different values and identities and demographics makes this unique intersectional identity that has its own mix of privilege and marginalization, and like everyone's different. And this doesn't just go within the LGBTQ community. You know, everyone has a little bit of intersectionality. You know, I am Indian and a man, and that's like a unique mixture. You can be like black and a woman, and that's another unique mixture compared to being like a black man. And within the queer community, there's just a lot more diversity that can exist, you know, in terms of race, gender identity, as you've mentioned, socioeconomic status, and even like disability, neurodivergence. Those are things that often don't get talked about as much, even within the queer community itself. So it's just important for allies and even just members of our community to be aware that everyone has their own unique journey in life, their own unique perspective. Some people, or I feel like something that's really common within the queer community is not having, you know, parental support or family support. That's something a lot of people relate to, especially being, you know, a person of color, an immigrant. There's an added level of my family doesn't understand what being queer is that I had to deal with compared to some of my other queer friends where, you know, their parents do accept them and, you know, they can transition at home and they have all this privilege, but they are still queer and we have a lot of stuff in common. There's also stuff that's different between us. So it's just that having that mindset that there's not one way to be queer, there's not one experience of being queer, and that everyone has their own unique experience in life. And sometimes some people have a little bit of a harder life just because of the way they look, the way that they are, because of our current societal, political climate. You know, it puts certain stigmas and it encourages people to be discriminatory. So yeah, I think it's just important that we all just appreciate the difference that exists between us, and we all kind of celebrate each other and uplift each other and realize not everyone has the same amount of privilege as others. And yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned that because you just kind of said a mouthful as far as the diversity between individuals themselves. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I would like to say in reference to that even though we're all different and we all have different mindsets, and you know that what makes us so unique. Mm-hmm. But we're all humans. Exactly. We all crave the humanistic care, and we want to be loved, and we want to feel like we belong. But again, that is the beauty of being humanistic. So
Exactly.
thank you for sharing that with me. Okay, so let's kind of dive in a little bit more. What barriers do you find within UTMB or just within the community that hinders the support of allyship, if any?
Yeah, I think one big thing I've noticed, and I think it kind of exists everywhere, especially any places of work, is just how busy everyone is. One of the big ways the queer community kind of flourishes is through word of mouth, is through community, is through hanging out, and just because everyone is a healthcare student here, everyone is faculty, we're all so busy with different schedules, so it's kind of difficult to create a community when everyone's kind of having their own thing on their plate. We try really hard to have regular game nights, regular socials to kind of foster this queer community. The other day, I think like last semester, we had a big queer mix and mingle, LGBT mix and mingle between faculty and students, and that just took initiative, someone to actually organize it and for people to show up, and then it worked and it was a great success. But it's that finding the time to make that initiative is difficult, especially in like a professional setting. Everyone's encouraged to work, everyone's encouraged to kind of hide their personal identity and just kind of, contribute to, the hospital, be a nurse, be a doctor, whatever. So it's kind of difficult to take extra time to celebrate our identities.
And I think one of the things that that I can add to that, what you just said, is that a lot of people sometimes are shell-shocked or just kind of find it difficult that they don't want to step on anybody's toes. And I think that kind of dives into my next question. What do you find are some of the biggest mistakes you see well-meaning allies make, and how can we fix that, or what do you suggest to improve that or grow within our UTMB community?
Yeah, and honestly, before I start answering that question for real, I just wanted to kind of add on to what y'all were saying, and something that I also sometimes hear is that people seem unsure if they're invited to something, so to speak. They'll see that an event is put on by, a minority organization, and they're like, oh, is this for, I'm straight, should I come? Yeah, if you're, the rule of thumb I always tell my friends is if you're hearing about it, if you're seeing it, in a school-wide broadcast, in, the class-wide group me, if you're seeing it in those venues, you have received an invitation. We have put it out there specifically because we want everyone to come. Pretty much anything that a student organization, especially like Allies in Health, would run, we want to see allies there. We want numbers. Our community includes allies. God knows we wouldn't be, where we are in society without allies. And so there are certainly valid times and places to have just safe spaces, so to speak, where it really is just centered around, us and our community, and we would prefer to just have others from the community there. But if you're, like I said earlier, if you're seeing it in a public forum, yeah, we want you there. Come on by. Be our friend.
Would you say that those open invitations would be what we call inclusivity for all?
Absolutely. Yeah. We want to build that community. We want to be a part of the greater community. That's really what all of our civil rights efforts as queer people have been about, just being part of society.
Now, since we're all a part of the academia setting or the academic enterprise, from your perspective, how do you think schools and educators can be better allies for the LGBTQ students or community?
I think a lot, for educators especially, we come back to that discussion of privilege. What does an educator have that, that a student does not? And they have, for starters, usually a lot more money, a lot more financial stability than a student does. They have a lot more time on their hands. Students tend to be, at the mercy of schedules that we didn't create for ourselves, of standards that we didn't create for ourselves, and we are in a period of our lives where it's do or die, where every day, actually for us as medical students, literally every single day of this week has a quiz that could make or break our grade in our class. So we're living much more moment to moment and focusing on just getting by, making ends meet, getting our grades, getting our degree. That's something that an educator or an administrator doesn't have to live with anymore, right? Because they're past that point in their lives. So that stability and those financial resources together are really powerful for coming alongside students and supporting them. We've really appreciated the faculty who have supported us for allies specifically, like Dr. Pierre Banks, Dr. Lisa Campo-Engelstein. They've been really, really important to our organization, and we're really happy to have them as supports. That's only 2 names, but there are a lot of very supportive faculty here, and I just want to acknowledge that. Dr. West, absolutely, yes. So we do feel really fortunate at UTMB to have several supportive faculty.
Yeah, and I know there's the safe zone training that exists, and sometimes I give a little sticker or a little pin, and I know just as a student walking by, an educator or faculty's office and seeing that little sticker, whether they're queer or not, whether they're openly, being an ally or not, just knowing that they took the effort to go through that training and to show a symbol of a little bit of allyship makes me feel a little bit better that there are people that I can trust even though I'm not explicitly talking to them all the time.
So Alex, this is new to my ears, what you're just saying right now.
Yeah.
So I want to learn and I want to know how, as a faculty and an administrator, how can we support you with that? So can you explain what the Safe Zone program is?
So from my understanding, it's something that's available for students and faculty to just kind of understand the basics of queerness and allyship and how you can be a good ally in a professional setting. I personally have not gone through it myself, but I know I've seen a lot of stickers.
I don't think we're the target audience.
I think our life has already Safe Zone trained us.
Yeah.
But I see those stickers around, especially in undergrad. I remember seeing those stickers outside, my professors' offices, and that it was like a symbol that, hey, I'm at least a little bit educated about this. I'm not going to completely discriminate against you, even as professionals, as doctors, you can wear little pins on your white coats.
Right.
Nurses can wear little pins,
Right.
and seeing pronoun pins or even a small rainbow, something that's difficult for the average person to see, but as a queer person that's looking out for these signs of safety, see a small little rainbow pin or a small pronoun pin, and you're like, oh, that person I can trust a little bit. I can feel a little bit safe in this environment, especially walking around. I'm biking around the neighborhood and I'm seeing different political signs that make me a little scared for the legislation that might negatively dictate my life. So these small little acts make me feel really
Thank you for bringing that to the audience attention. And of course, I'm learning something new as we're talking within our safe space right here, right now. I know that's one resource or opportunity that you said that we can help support you guys in. But what about if, I know sometimes when pronouns come up, some people are very uncomfortable or don't really know what to say or how to address it. Is there any information or that you can kind of give us, strategies that you can give us to handle that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I know a pronoun can be if people are not used to something, it's hard to pick up a new habit. So pronouns aren't the most important thing in the whole universe, but it is a really great way for people to kind of express their gender identity. It's just one way someone has control over themselves to express themselves to someone else. And when people don't respect that, it's a purposeful act of violence, discrimination. So it's just kind of mindful. You might just think it's just a word, it's just language, but language is how we communicate, how we experience the world, and how we express ourselves. So it's just kind of an important thing to keep in mind. So even myself, I'm non-binary. I use they, them pronouns. But when I first heard about they, them pronouns, I was so bad at it. I would misgender my friends, and in the moments that you misgender someone, it's just kind of sorry, you fix it and you move on. You don't make it a big deal. You don't linger on it. It's they, and then you kind of continue your sentence. for me, just took some practice. You meet someone who's non-binary that uses they, them pronouns. You're given an opportunity to practice and pick up a new habit. Even in your own head, when you're thinking about someone, you should use the right pronouns. If you accidentally use the wrong pronouns in your own head, just correct it yourself. It's less embarrassing because you don't have to apologize to anyone. No one else heard it, but you kind of fix it. And just that repetition kind of helps settle down or make you get used to using different pronouns. They, them pronouns can be difficult to use if you've never used it, but also people use they, them pronouns all the time without realizing it. Like, oh, somebody left their jacket around. You just use their as a single gender neutral version, people don't realize it. And yeah, it can be hard to, pick up a habit, but just with practice, repetition, and just exposing yourself to queer people and giving yourself a way to practice, makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, I think that ties in really well with finally getting to answering that question that you posed me earlier. What are some of the mistakes that you see well-meaning allies make? I think that a lot, the overwhelming majority of mistakes that well-meaning allies make, I want to be very clear, I'm not talking about people who are not allies, who for whom these things are usually not mistakes. Usually they are pointed. Usually they are not, they are not exactly sorry for them. But when we're talking about well-meaning allies who make mistakes, all of those mistakes come from implicit biases that people aren't aware that they hold. And I love having a background in cognitive psychology when I talk about this, because biases and prejudices come with such a moralized overtone to them when we talk about them. And that actually is completely contrary to what we know about cognitive psychology. Implicit biases are just that. They're implicit.
Right.
They are so subconscious and ingrained in your thought process about the world that most of the time you're not even aware that they're there.
Exactly.
The decisions and the attitudes that you hold around the decisions that you make are made on a fraction of a second basis. Those neurons have fired in your brain long before you're able to formulate a conscious thought about them. And getting to that level is really the crux of changing the way that you behave towards other people. And the first step, just like, they say in AA, is admitting you have a problem. The first step is admitting that you're just a human being who has biases. Everybody has biases.
Right.
And we have those biases not, because we're terrible people or because we're shallow or unintelligent or not introspective. We have those biases because our brains function on a series of heuristics and mnemonics, of shorthand ways to solve routine problems in our environment. And that's just because we are animals that evolved that way. Right. And getting to the meat of unpacking those takes not just effort and willingness, but time and repeated exposure. That's why issues like representation in media, and especially the quality of representation in media, is so important. Having bad representation in a lot of ways is worse than having no representation at all. And having no representation at all, it reinforces the idea that, some group of people is not just a normal part of society. They're some kind of anomaly. And so that is really the challenging part. And that's the challenging part not just for allies, but for every single human being on this earth. If there's nothing else that I always want to emphasize, it's that it's so normal to have biases.
Right.
It's so normal. But we do also have to acknowledge that those biases didn't come from nowhere. And some of those biases that we just passively absorb from existing in a society, those biases aren't actually a mistake on the part of the people who are responsible for perpetuating them. We do exist in a society that historically has wanted the public to think a certain way about certain groups of people. It was not long ago that homosexuality was classified as a mental illness in medicine. There are people on this earth who are younger than you think, who were, born when that was still considered a mental illness. So that pathologization is still very recent, and the effects of that on our biases are something that even we as queer people have to wrestle with in our own journeys to accepting ourselves, let alone being accepted by others in society. So the very best allies that I have in my life have all done a lot of work getting to the bottom of, first of all, understanding what biases they hold in the first place, and then doing everything they can to unpack them.
And in addition to that, like you said, looking inside oneself to kind of see exactly where it stands or where it comes from. Also playing a part of just acknowledging that a lot of it stems from the past, like you said, history. Structural racism is a part of that as well, that stems from that. But all this also can lead not only for biases, but it can perpetuate microaggressions as well, which is another big thing that I feel like in society we have to really, really pay attention to as well. Exactly. So you just said a whole bunch of stuff. Both of you really, we've had such a rich dialogue today. I want to close it to where, with Allies in Health, are you able to leave our audience with other opportunities to be a part of Ally Health, or other resources that you would recommend in order to being a better ally within the UTMB community?
Yeah, I'll definitely plug our org, Allies in Health. We're trying to be a fully intersectional org with all the schools represented. So if you're an ally, if you're a queer person looking for a community, if you want just a group of people to hang out with, or just, be more of an advocate, a bigger ally in society, definitely join our org. We're definitely a lot more active this year. We're trying to get a lot more events planned. You can find us on Instagram at Allies in Health UTMB. You can kind of keep up to date with our events there, and we hope to see y'all at a next upcoming event.
Brianne, anything you want to add? Last words of wisdom, last bites of wisdom?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Go vote. Go vote. Go vote. And I also stress this to everyone I talk to, no matter how you feel about those two people at the top of the ticket, there's so much political power in down ballot voting. Get to know your state and local legislators. They are the people making a lot of the decisions that shape our daily lives, especially when it comes to application of things like anti-discrimination laws, when it comes to things like healthcare access. That a lot of that is state and local level. So please vote down ballot too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. Exactly. November 5th is a very important election. It affects everyone at the local, state, and national level. In closing to our audience, I want to state that always remember that there are endless opportunities to conquer, and that your words, your voice matters. Until next time, we'll see you soon, or talk with you soon, rather. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Until next time, we hope you have enjoyed the information received and utilized this resource tool to make an impact in your respective community. The Opportunity Avenue podcast was designed by Dr. Cindy West, narrated by Dr. Shelley Brody, and produced by the SON Multimedia Lab. If you are a nurse, a nursing student, faculty, staff, or healthcare provider, and interested in learning more about the topics discussed, please contact the Opportunity, Belonging, and Enrichment Advisory Committee at sonobe@utmb.edu, the UTMB School of Nursing podcast website at nursing.utmb.edu. utmb.edu/podcast, Apple Podcast, or Spotify. The opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guest and do not reflect the views of UTMB, the School of Nursing, nor any other affiliated entities.